Welcome to Improve Your English Writing video number 40, where I'll be discussing the topic of quotation marks. This is part 2 of a 3-part series on quotation marks. In this video, I'll be specifically covering the topics of a colon before direct quotation, which is Rule 33, and closing quotation marks with other punctuation marks, Rule number 34. So if you'd like to get notifications for this series, please click subscribe. If you like the video or think others will find it useful, please click like and check out links to videos and books in the description, like a link to the companion volume there. So let's dive into it. Rule number 33. So rule number 33 says use a colon before a direct quotation when an independent clause introduces the quotation or when the direct quotation is more than one sentence. So just some nuances. Oh, here's some examples. Sorry, thought I had some nuances first. The judge gave the jury excellent instructions, which is an independent clause. So since we have an independent clause introducing the direct quotation, we just put a colon there. So the judge gave the jury excellent instructions, colon, quote, gather the facts and decide the case in the deliberation room. Oh, and the other case is we use a colon when the quote is more than one sentence. So Mrs. Anderson said, colon, quote, I have heard enough, and you are beating around the bush, period. Please answer the question, close quotation. So here we have we can use a colon because what we're quoting is more than one sentence. So those are the two cases where you use a colon. One, rather you have the introductory phrase is, or maybe it's not a phrase, the introductory element is an independent clause, then we use a colon, and we don't have to have more than one sentence, we can just have one sentence. Or when what we're quoting is more than one sentence. So and that's the second case here. We have this introductory phrase, and then we have the quote is more than one sentence. So now with I spoke about this in the last video about how punctuation marks, how do you deal with closing quotation marks and other punctuation marks? Well, here's the answer is always place a period or comma inside closing quotation marks, and always place a colon or semicolon outside closing quotation marks. So period and comma always inside, colon and semicolon always outside. Place all other punctuation marks outside the closing quotation marks unless it is part of the original quote. So basically, for everything else, every other punctuation mark, it depends on if the punctuation mark is part of the original quote or is not part of the original quote. When it's part of the original quote, put it inside. When it's not part of the original quote, put it outside. So that's the basics. That's all that you need to know with quotation marks and other punctuation marks. And then some nuances. Some nuances about the colon and semicolon. A note that if you're using AP style, our AP places a colon and semicolon inside the closing quotation marks when it is part of the direct quotation. So it basically always puts a period and comma inside, but then for every other punctuation mark, it says if it's part of the original quote, put it inside. If it's not, put it outside. But that's only for AP because all the other style manuals follow the rule that's right up here. That's why it's part of my rules that basically almost every other style guide you look at says you place a colon or semicolon outside the quotation marks. So it's really the AP which has does it slightly different. So that's just your nuance on the colon and semicolon, depending on what style guide you're using. If you're not really following a style guide, then basically almost all the style guides say that the colon and semicolon are placed outside closing quotation marks. So let's look at some examples. For the comma and period, remember they always go inside closing quotation marks. So some examples: Mary used satire in her poem Scorned. So here we'd put this poem, titles of poems are put in quotation marks. Most people would probably write, put the period on the outside, but actually the period goes on the inside. Periods and commas always inside. Hold the elevator, comma, quotation mark, he shouted. I pointed this out in the last video that the comma goes inside. So now that we're at the rule is the comma always goes inside the closing quotation mark. So this is how you'd write it. In semicolon and colon, remember they always go outside closing quotation marks. I know I just spent a lot of time on it, the subject on the last slide, so just the summary is AP places it inside when it's part of the quotation marks, and probably, and all the other ones don't. So, customer service did not honor the no hassle warranty, semicolon. I emailed the company president. So here we have two independent clauses. No coordinating conjunction. I could say they're closely related, but here, this independent clause is ending with with quotes. So the semicolon goes outside the closing quotation mark. For a colon, if you had AP style, it'd have to be. I would assume this is not part the no hassle warranty. I'm assuming it would probably not be part of the direct quotation. It'd probably go outside. And here's another example: is in customer service calls, we include two things under other. So someone is quoting. This is probably quoting a portion of a form that says other, and they're specifying that colon because now we have this. If you look at the sentence on a whole, you actually have this independent clause, and then you have a series of two items. The items. There's only two items in the series, so you just separate them with and. But you really have an independent clause in a series, and we've already covered that. So use a colon between those. But here, the independent clause ends with a word that's in quotations, so we put the colon outside of the closing quotation marks. Always. Unless it's AP style, and I'd hardly think that the colon would be part of the direct quotation, so I would assume these two examples are correct even for AP style. But just a note, AP style would place the colon or semicolon inside the closing quotation marks if it was part of the original quote. But for everybody else, put it outside. And then for all the other punctuation marks, so that covers the period, comma, semicolon, colon. For all the other punctuation marks, it really depends on if it's part of the original quote or not. So this situation is I'm saying, the punctuation is part of the original quote, just for context wise. And if that's the case, then the punctuation mark goes inside the closing quotation marks. So she asked, did you sign the agreement? So here we actually have a question, so it's probably seems pretty natural that that there would be a question mark as part of the original quote. She asked, did you sign the agreement? So since the question mark was part of the original quote, then it goes inside. Another example is the text message read, watch out. So there must have been an exclamation mark in the original text message. So therefore, when we quote it, we put the question mark on the inside of the quotation. The police report states, comma, actually we have a signal phrase here. All these three are signal phrases, separating with comma. Just go back to the rules of the last video. States, comma, I saw a hooded person, dash. So the dash must be part of the police report. So since it's part of the police report, we would include the dash inside the quotation marks. So the next type of situation is the punctuation mark is not part of the original quote. And remember, we're talking about like question marks, exclamation points, and dashes at this point. And you always place the punctuation mark outside of the quotation mark. So remember, context, even though you may read some of these examples and you may dispute like, oh, maybe the, that punctuation mark is, but I'm actually telling you that the punctuation mark is not part of the original quote, therefore it has to go on the outside. And on these examples here, I'm saying that the punctuation mark was in the original quote for the context. So some examples. Did Lester say, hold the elevator? This seems reasonable because we're just asking what Lester, said, and he said hold the elevator, which is not a question. So it seems reasonable that that there was no question mark in the original quote. But I am saying it was not part of it. So since it's not part of the original quote, the question mark goes on the outside. Another example is Mia overheard the gang members say, let's murder, dash. So the dash is not part of the original quote, therefore we put it outside the closing quotation marks. I think I have one final example is the tree trimmer shouted timber. You think the exclamation point would go inside, but maybe whatever was ever part of the quote, the exclamation mark was not part of the original quote. Therefore, since it's not part of the original quote, it goes on the outside of the closing quotation marks. That's it for this video. If you want to get notifications for this series, please click subscribe. If you like the video or think others will find it useful, please click like. Check out links to books and videos in the description. Thank you.